Before we start, say where in this wide world you follow from. Leave your city or country in the comments. These frontier stories travel distance on their own, so sit tight. The boy rested folded at the border of a frozen fence line, small body bent like loose ash blown from a dying fire. He wore slices of damaged deerskin. He carried a faint pulse. Nothing else. Snow gathered on his lashes. It held uncertainty in place. Boaz Callahan eased back on his reins, leather tightening under a slow, decisive pull. Quiet claimed space around him. Wind slashed at shallow angles across the prairie. Sound refused momentum. The plains left no instructions for interpretation. He paused. He examined. The child looked abandoned by outcomes. Boaz spent nearly 3 weeks without speaking to another human. Food stayed cold and scarce. A memory of loss pressed hard at his center. A sickness stole his own child weeks before. His coat carried history of stall dust and salted meat. Hands remained steeped in horse-skin scents and distant regret. He left the saddle deliberately. Boots scraped snow-hardened crust. The cold ground received each step loudly enough to mark presence without dramatizing it. The boy didn't shift. Boaz lowered to his knee beside him, spine bending like someone confirming a diagnosis he already suspected. He placed recognition into moment. He reached to carry the child, slow hands making no sudden claims. The boy exhaled a small, painful sound. It carried too little strength to earn anger. It didn't confirm trust. It only confirmed life. Boaz wrapped the boy inside his coat. He loaded weight into arms without announcing heroics. The child pressed heat against his chest. A fever burned beneath thin, frozen skin. His eyes split open halfway, glossed in fogged uncertainty, not resistance. His stare refused classification. It asked only if Boaz was signal or mirage. Inside the cabin, Boaz fed sparks back into the fire's appetite. No ceremony, just calculation, would flame. Patience, heat rebuilt identity in the corner. Where cold tried erasing it, Boaz sank into a chair. The child slept, folded in his arms. Broth waited in a chipped cup, thin, weak, mostly water and salt. Boaz studied the boy's rise and fall of lung motion like a man cataloguing probabilities, not outcomes. He didn't ask for comfort. He only asked for continuation. His eyes traced the old Bible on the shelf with the touch of habit, not devotion. He laid fingers on the cover like checking a familiar tool, but left it closed. Some wounds don't invite commentary. They invite quiet monitoring. Morning came without warning shots or storybook punctuation. The boy still lived, bare margin. Boaz watched curiosity gather in the light the same way snow gathered on lashes earlier, uncertain but persistent. Where had he come from? Why was he alone? Boaz left him drops of broth with a carved spoon his wife once used. The same one shed used for their son. He tried natto, look at it too long. The boy drank like a fawn. Small sips, then more. When Boaz laid him down again, the boy clutched the worn edge of a quilt stitched by hands long buried. That caught him like the child somehow knew how to hold grief gently. By noon, Desno thickened. At the general store the next day, folks talked in low voices as Boaz bought flour and salt pork. Riker, the sheriff, gave him a long look from under his black hat. He yours, Bo said. He ain't nobody's. Looks Apache. Boaz shrugged. Looks hungry. That answer didn't sit right, it echoed, to cold and clean, in a town where kindness came second to suspicion. Widow Tally, bless when he came home her bones, gave Boaz 2 extra jars, o'flard, and didn't say why. When he came home, the boy was awake, silent, staring. He wouldn't speak, but half allowed Boaz with those big broken eyes, always one step behind. At night, he curled near the fire and pressed his palm against Boaz's boot, as if to make sure he didn't disappear. As if he knew what being left felt like. The third night, Boaz found him curled in the kitchen corner, hand clutching a piece of cornbread tight in his sleep. That's when Boaz wept for the first time in years. Quiet, hunched back against the door, not because he was sad. Exactly, just because the world kept spinning, and no one asked if you were ready. Fourth night, Boaz heard a knock. He weren't expecting anyone. His shotgun leaned by the door, his chest pulled tight. When he opened it, the figure rested on the porch, framed by falling snow and dusklight. Women, Apache, one tall and proud, scars running down her cheek like claw marks from the earth itself. The other, smaller, softer, hands trembling in the cold, both cloaked in buffalo hide and silence. The taller one met his eyes with fire, the smaller one with something gentler. Hope, maybe. Tenth boy ran past him and into their arms. He didn't cry, just pressed his foes to the taller woman's waist and wrapped his arms around her like he'd been holding it all in too long. Bo stood in the doorway, hat in hand, throat dry. The scarred woman looked at. He took the barnim hard. You fed him. I did. Why? Bo's. He needed bread. The silence he thought followed had weight to it. Thea the woman knelt and cradled the boy, humming low, a song too old for words. Snow settled on her hair. Boaz saw know how young they were, barely older than girls, yet aged by grief. Please, the scarred woman said after a long breath, let us stay one night, just till snow passes. Boaz nodded once. No need for more. He gave them the hearth. He took the barn. That night, as he lay on straw with his coat for a blanket, he thought of his wife again, not her face, but her hands. How they'd held bread like it was a sacred thing. He hadn't dreamed in years, but now dreams came back, soft tones of firelight and songs he'd never heard before. The next day, the boy played outside with a stick, drawing circles in the snow. The women cooked. The next day one hummed while the other chopped turnips. Boaz watched from the porch. The scarred one's name was Eo. The quiet one was Aoka said little, but her eyes missed nothing. When she caught Boaz watching, she said, We are not thieves. I know. Town won't care. I know that too. Her scar tightened when she frowned. My sister can sue. Then I've got clothes, neat. That was all it took. Another night passed. Then another. They stayed, not because it was asked, but because everything between them began to settle, like snow on the roof, unnoticed. Till it softened the sound of everything. Boaz fixed the cellar into a room, brought down blankets, built bunks. Theboy Kota, they called him, slept wherever he landed, sometimes beside Salali, sometimes under the table, curled beside Boaz's chair like a pup. One morning, the sheriff came. He didn't. Boaz stepped outside before the mon dismounted. You got company. Riker said flat. Just folks, Apache. Folks, Boaz didn't answer. They planning to stay. They planning to eat. That ain't what I asked. Boaz stared at him harder now to break stone. Riker shifted in his saddle. Town's nervous. Folks say you are hiding trouble. I'm feeding people. That's all. People got short Marys. Boaz, real short. Boaz stepped forward. Then maybe they ought to write him down. Riker spat in the snow. Suit yourself. He rode off slow. The wind stirred behind him, like even the air didn't want to follow. That night, Aoka packed her satchel. Said nothing. Salali wept quietly as she folded their boy's small blanket. Boaz didn't stop them. He went outside, sat on the porch, sky full of clouds, mouth full of dust. Then the boy came out, stood between them, lifted his arms to both Boaz and Salali. Didn't speak, just looked. That moment broke something open. We don't want trouble. Boaz shook his head. Then were the same. They stayed. That weak word spread. Some said Boaz had gone soft. Others whispered. Widow Tally told Enionwood, listen, that Boaz had more hearth than the rest of AM combined. Then came fire. Not at the ranch. In town a barn was lit. Horses spooked. Flames licked sky. No one hurt, but the message was clear. Next time it would be them. Boaz stood that night with his shotgun laid across his lap. Not raised, just. Salali came out with tea, sat beside him. Quiet. I can leave, Shu whispered. We can go. Boaz looked at her. You feel safe out there? No, then you ain't going. Simple as breath. Next morning, Aoka stood beside him as Hecate firewood. Said, you're not like others. Boaz said nothing. You lost Samin, she said. He nodded. So did we. That was the first time they really spoke. Connection didn't come with shared silence words. It came with shared silence. Days passed. Kota smiled more, drew horses in the dirt, laughed when Sage sneezed. Only Venning, Boaz found a quilt on his bed, mended and beautiful. Solly blushed when he looked away. Still, he said nothing. Feelings like seeds, me, time, and... The storm came on a Tuesday. Men rode in with torches. 6 of them, face shelf hidden by scarves. Boaz saw them from the ridge. No need to ask why they... He stood in the doorway. Didn't reach for his gun. Behind him, Aoka stepped out, stood to his left. Salala came too. The boy clutched her dress. The leader raised a torch. We warned you. Boaz stepped forward. You did. You're siding with them. I'm siding with bread and fire and boys who shouldn't in snow. The torch flickered. Men murmured. Salali stepped forward, lifted a flute from her belt, and played a single trembling note. Then another lullaby, too old to be remembered, yet it stopped the wind itself. One man lowered his torch. Another turned his horse. Riker arrived last. Watched from his... Didn't speak for a long time. Then you all done here? Nobody answered then. Riker said, Lo, let the wind settle this, and turned away. So did the rest. Silence fell like grace. Boza stood there long after they left. On Lethon did he exhale. That night they shared stew. Kota laughed until he fell asleep with peas in his hair. Bose looked around the fire at Aoka threading a new bowstring. At Salala brushing snow from Kota's brow, at Thuam orange glow filling a house that had once known only loss. He wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, her never had been. Snow kept falling, but no, it felt like a blessing, not a threat. each flake quiet as forgiveness. Sometimes love doesn't ride in loud. Sometimes it walks through your door barefoot, covered in frost, asking for shelter, and changes everything without asking for a thing in return. Maybe love is bread in the hand. Maybe it's fire in the hearth. Or maybe it's just choosing to stay when leaving would be easier.